Welcome to part 3 of chapter 10, where we will look at peers in adolescence. And in this section, we will deal with friendships, peer groups, and then dating and romantic relationships. Beginning with friendships. As it says here, most teens prefer a smaller number of friendships that are more intense and more intimate. This is as opposed to the trend in childhood for larger groups. We talked about in an earlier chapter that particularly among boys during childhood, groups would tend to be larger so that they could engage in sports and competitive activities. Now in adolescence, the friendships tend to be smaller groups, more intimate and intense. They're not just play partners anymore. Friends become increasingly important in meeting social needs, and whether these social needs are being met or not determines our emotional well-being. Skipping ahead to the next slide and looking at the graph here, this is looking at reports from children and adolescents about who they self-disclose to, between parents versus peer groups or friends. And you can see that as a child goes into adolescence, that friends become more important than parents in meeting their social needs for self-disclosure. Somebody to confide in. And you can see that the shift from parents being more important to friends is happening somewhere around grade 6, and as we're moving into early adolescence, and increasingly as we go further into adolescence, friends, are meeting that need for self-disclosure much more than parents do. So we are disclosing our secrets and our intimate details of our lives to our friends much more than our parents. You can see a little bit of a reversal as we look at the college-aged young adults, that parents are making a little bit of a rebound, and this often occurs after adolescents have gone away to college or university. That there's a little separation, and they actually will often confide more in the parents than when they were living with them. If they've actually moved away from home, sometimes it makes it easier for them to self-disclose to their parents. But anyways, the major point here is that friends are more important than parents during the adolescent years for meeting intimate social needs. If an adolescent fails to develop close friendships, they tend to experience loneliness and a reduced sense of self-worth. Definitely affects their self-esteem. It's very important that adolescents have at least one close friend to help to meet their social needs. Okay, I'm going to backtrack to the previous slide. It says here developmental advantages occur when adolescents have friends who have good traits and qualities. Being socially skilled, supportive, oriented towards academic achievement. On the other hand, it's a disadvantage if their friends have negative qualities, conflict-ridden, poor quality friendships, those friends who encourage drinking. So our peer groups certainly influence our behavior, and it can be either in a positive or negative way. When I say peer group, more specifically our friendship groups. So one example, for example, from research in the literature, is that adolescents tend to adapt their smoking and drinking behavior to that of their best friends. If that happens to be good behavior, then that's advantageous. If their smoking and drinking behavior is negative, then there would be a disadvantage to have a friend like that. So our friends certainly affect our behaviors in a positive or negative way. Peer groups and peer pressure. Young adolescents conform more to peer standards than do children. So as we get into adolescence, because our peer groups and our friendships do become more important in meeting our social needs, peer pressure becomes more pronounced. In childhood, we may or may not copy others, but it's not from feeling the same sense of pressure that we would feel in adolescence when we are trying to form connections with others. Um, young okay. Conformity peaks around 8th and 9th grades, especially to the antisocial behaviors or standards of peers. When we do conform to our peers or copy the behaviors, it's usually more on the antisocial side of things rather than positive behaviors when we're looking at 8th and 9th grade students. And we're more likely to conform to those that have a higher status, or at least a perceived higher status. So if you believe that the people you're hanging out with are more popular than you are, and then you're more likely to conform to them. It's like you look up to them in some way, and so you want to conform in order to get in their good books. Okay. Boys are more influenced by peer pressure that involves sexual behavior than girls are. Adolescents with low self-esteem and high social anxiety are the most likely to conform to peers. Once again, this goes with the idea of if you have low self-esteem, then the person you're with, probably you would perceive them as having a higher status than yourself. So it makes it more likely that you would conform. Also during transitions, when your life is in somewhat of a disarray because you moved to a new school or a new community, it makes it more likely you'll conform in order to try to fit in. Cliques and crowds. Cliques are small groups averaging 5 to 6 individuals. You have similar interests and activities that you engage in. Usually you're around the same or similar age. You have similar tastes. You enjoy each other's company, and so you hang out together. Crowds are less personal than a clique. They are reputation based. You may not spend time with other members of the crowd. You may not know all the other members of the crowd. They're just reputation-based groups. So, for instance, at a school, there may be the jocks or the stoners or the popular kids, the nerds. So each one of those is considered a crowd. But obviously, not every jock knows every other jock, or not every nerd knows every other nerd. So it's very different. They're far less personal. Dating and romantic relationships in adolescence is our final topic in this section on peers. And we'll look at 3 stages that are considered somewhat typical of the average teenager or adolescent. The first of the 3 stages is entry into romantic attractions and affiliations, sometime approximately around 11 to 13 years of age. This is triggered by puberty, wherein the young adolescent becomes intensely interested in romance, and they will tend to develop crushes at this age, but rarely are they acting on them yet. In the second stage, they start to explore romantic relationships, approximately 14 to 16 years of age. So we move from early adolescence to mid-adolescence. There are 2 typical types of explorations that go on during these middle adolescent years. The first is casual dating, where dating will tend to last a few weeks at a time, or maybe up to a month at most. In those short-term relationships, where couples hook up briefly and just to kind of try it out, and so it's rapidly shifting relationships. The second type of exploration that mid-adolescents go through is dating in groups. And this is fairly common. In that you have social support by going out in groups where a number of guys and a number of girls all go out together. This reflects the importance of peers during adolescence. They are your support system, and so it's much more comfortable for adolescents to date in groups than to just do it as couples. And then the third stage is the consolidating dyadic romantic bonds between 17 and 19. So this is later adolescence. And these relationships are more serious, romantic relationships that tend to basically resemble adult relationships. So they're more stable and more enduring. And then instead of lasting a few weeks to a month, they may last months or even years. Um, and okay, and that is the third stage. So once again, it's just considered a typical average pattern. Not everyone goes through it like this. Many people would, the timing will be different for many people, or they may not go through these stages at all. And that concludes our third section of chapter 10.